Welcome everyone to the second installment of the Jobs with Justice webinar series this year. My name is Richard Von Glahn. I am the Policy Director with Missouri Jobs with Justice, and I'm going to give the presentation today. Today, we are going to zero in on our biggest legislative priority for 2022, the preservation of the Missouri ballot initiative process. Folks might remember in January, we went over numerous issues that we were focused on this year, but this month we're really focusing in on our number one priority, which is protecting Missouri's ballot initiative process. Our hope today is that you will leave this meeting clear about what these attacks are all about, but more importantly, how to talk about it in your social networks and the steps that will be necessary to defeat them. But before we dive into that, a few of our standard reminders. And Rachel, if you can, there we go. I expect that we might have an opportunity for some discussion and questions at the end of the day, or at the end of the presentation. But I would still ask that you use the Q&A function to ask those questions so I can keep track of them and make sure that we get them all answered. For comments on the presentation or technical help, please go ahead and use the chat function. All of the information and relevant links are going to be shared after the presentation. And speaking of using the chat function, please go ahead and use it like we always do as a way to do introductions. We have, looks like over 50 participants on the call. So please introduce yourself, your name, your pronouns, what part of the state you're from, and organization, so we can all say hello and get to know everyone together. Rachel, next slide. One thing I really love about ballot initiatives is the teamwork that they require. Gathering 200 or 300,000 signatures just to put an issue to a vote is no easy task. It requires all of us to support one another, whether we would be directly impacted or not. That is really the spirit of the Jobs with Justice Be There pledge, which is a foundational document for Jobs with Justice. So I'm going to read that again to remind everyone about who and what JWJ is all about. I will be there to fight for an economy, a democracy, and a Missouri that works for all of us, no matter the color of our skin, our zip code, or what's in our wallets. I commit to be there at least 5 times a year, standing up for our rights as working people, Black, brown, and white, to good jobs and healthy communities, supporting the right of all workers to organize and bargain collectively, fighting for fair wages in the face of corporate greed, fighting against white supremacy wherever I encounter it, and standing up for racial justice, organizing the unorganized to take aggressive action to secure a better future for all of us, and mobilizing those already organized to join the fight for jobs with justice. As I read that, I can think of all of the ways that the Be There pledge relates directly, and how the ballot initiative process has allowed us to fulfill the spirit of the Be There pledge year after year. Okay, so let's get into it. About 115 years ago, Missourians saw fit to enshrine the right to direct democracy into our state constitution. Doing so was meant to provide citizens a check on our legislature, to make sure that our voices would be heard, even if politicians weren't hearing us. It has been part of our state, part of our culture, and a key part of our democracy for over a century. This history makes it a trusted process. Even in a time of extreme political polarization, where we see currently the Missouri Senate is a great example of how dysfunctional extreme political polarization can be, Missourians still trust one another. That is why ballot initiatives rank highest in voters' confidence on how to make laws. Because in the ballot initiative process, everyone gets an equal chance to vote and to make change. Your vote, my vote, weighs the same as Governor Parsons' vote or any senator or representative's vote. Lobbyists and political contributions hold less influence when everyone gets to vote on an issue. And you can see on the chart that a majority of voters actually trust the ballot initiative process and prefer that as the process as to how we make laws. So in a time when our politics are broken, the ballot initiative process allows us to come together and solve important issues facing our communities. And now I want to ask people to use the chat function again. And if you've worked on an initiative petition before, please put it in the chat. I know we've worked on a lot of these together, and we have a broad coalition of people who worked on different things. But I would love to see the issues that people have joined together and worked on as part of Jobs with Justice. Certainly, we see a couple featured right here. The most recent effort to expand Medicaid, not just one, but two successful campaigns to raise the minimum wage, Clean Missouri, the repeal of right to work, early voting, and others. So while we have been able to come together and solve important issues facing our communities, this has upset some politicians and special interests. They have frankly had enough of our democracy. After being on the losing side of several recent initiatives, they have decided it is time to change our Constitution. They are proposing numerous bills, I think we're up to 20 now, that would make qualifying and passing citizen initiative petitions much more difficult, if not downright impossible. They want to preserve power for politicians while taking ours. This should not be completely shocking, because frankly, this also happened 30 years ago. 30 years ago, politicians were upset about some reforms that voters had taken upon ourselves to pass. So they tried to pass laws to make the citizen initiative process more difficult. Then Governor John Ashcroft, who's not someone I usually quote, vetoed the reforms, correctly pointing out that the ballot initiative process is an important tool for voters who have no influence in the halls of Jefferson City. He scolded politicians who sought to use their power to take power away from voters. But just like in the early 90s, voters today are also not asking for this. In fact, huge majorities of voters oppose attempts by the legislature to make it harder for voters to pass laws or amend our Constitution. This is from some polling that we did this fall. While 20 bills may have been filed by politicians in Jefferson City, not a single ballot initiative by a Missouri resident has been filed to change our process. Not a single one. The truth is, the ballot initiative is the people's power. We have used it, and frankly used it infrequently, to propose reforms referring less than one issue to the ballot for every 4 the legislature sends to us. But being able to do this makes it a critical part of the toolkit of our democracy, because it maintains a balance between the people and the politicians elected to serve us. Now, special interests are going to try to send innocuous sounding reforms to us to try to take our power. but we can and we must stop them. And here's a couple ways that we have to do it. First, we have to remind people what the initiative petition process is and why we value it. Initiative petitions are not about the number of signatures we need to gather or where we gather them. It's not about percentages of votes, or thresholds, or other things. Initiative petitions are about the public will. They are about our freedom and they are about our heritage. Do not talk about details of the process. Talk about the values behind the process. Public will, freedom to have a say on important issues. That is what reminds people as to why these are important. And second, we need to expose the motivation behind the so-called reforms that are being heard in Jefferson City. We should ask ourselves, if voters aren't asking for this ourselves, and remember, we could file an initiative petition to change the initiative petition process. There's nothing that stops Missouri voters from using the current process to change the process. But we've got to wonder, if that's not happening, why are politicians doing it to us? The point is, and some politicians in this debate have been clear enough in saying this, is they do not want to follow our direction. We've heard politicians in Missouri say, I am proud to stand against the will of the people of my district. I saw a number of people who mentioned working to expand Medicaid eligibility. And just yesterday, the House perfected a bill to repeal Medicaid expansion. They don't respect our voice. And so they want to silence our voice. They simply don't want to hear it. That is what this fight is about. And so I encourage everyone that we can't be silent. And I was very proud, right before this call, there was a hearing in the Senate where one person testified in support of changing the initiative petition process. Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft. Probably hurts the feelings of his father, doesn't listen to his father. And then dozens testified against it. We can't be silent. We need everyone's help. Email your legislator. Tell them why this is important to you, how you've worked on it. Sign up with Jobs with Justice and a number of other groups as we are working to have, we will be doing phone banks throughout the month of April, connecting voters to their elected officials, telling them how wrong this is. We are scheduled to have a lobby day to go to Jefferson City on May 3rd, the last 2 weeks of session, when a lot of bills get heard and get passed. If you are part of an organization, make sure your organization has signed on to be part of the coalition to defend Missouri's democracy. And make sure that you are a member, either of Jobs with Justice or any of the other dozens of organizations that are fighting to preserve our heritage and preserve our democracy. These are all going to be key things. There are going to be a lot of bills that move through the legislature. You will notice our email to legislators, we're not actually referencing specific bills anymore because there's 20 of them. We're talking about the principle and what we have to do. And if you don't think those things are important, I will tell you last week, when the first of these bills was being heard on the Senate floor, State Representative Trish Gunby from St. Louis County read the testimony, over 70 pieces of testimony from individuals who gathered signatures, who talked about gathering in the wind, in the rain, in the snow, in the heat, in the community that is built through the ballot initiative process, and being able to take issues directly to voters. And it was some of the more powerful testimony that I have ever heard read on the House floor in Jefferson City. So these are the critical things that we need everyone's help with. And so I encourage you to do not just one, but all of them, and help us build the army, to build the political will to hold these at bay once again. All of this is going to be critically important. We are going to work to defeat these bills. But if we don't, if these bills pass, I should remind everyone, these are actually proposals of a constitutional amendment. And so the legislature cannot change this process simply on their own. They need a vote of the people to do so. So everything that we're doing, we want to be thinking about how do we communicate with elected officials, but how do we also communicate with our neighbors, with our union members, with our congregations, with the community organizations that we're part of. And so we are happy, myself, Nunu Adiong from Missouri Healthcare for All, Ashton Kunal from the Missouri Sierra Club are always willing to help do this presentation. We're happy to train you to do this presentation, to be able to do this and help with this, because that's what we're going to need. If this gets referred to the ballot, we're going to need an army that is ready to fight. So I'm going to stop now, and I see there's a couple questions in the Q&A, and I see a comment that those of us on computers can see the presentation, but those on by telephone may only be hearing me. We will email out the slides and the presentation so everyone has access to it, even if you are only able to join by phone today. So I'm going to take a look at the Q&As and see what I can answer here. I see a question from Diane. Will we receive this PowerPoint? I'm happy to provide this PowerPoint to anyone who needs it. I'm happy to actually provide the notes that I use in presenting this, if you want to present it to any community organizations that you want. What will stop legislators from ignoring this one if it passes as a ballot item? Well, I mean, I think this is a thing that the legislature actually wants to pass. So they probably won't be ignoring their own ideas that they do. It is one interesting point of earlier today, two bills that propose this, Senate Joint Resolution 31 and Senate Joint Resolution 37, were heard right before this call, actually. And both of those bills would seek to raise the threshold for citizen initiative, especially on constitutional amendments, but would not change the threshold for legislative referrals. So if citizens spent the time of gathering 300,000 signatures to place an issue on the ballot, we would have to pass it at 60% or potentially 66%, whereas if 100 legislators voted to refer an issue to the ballot, it would only need to pass at 50%. That is some of the hypocrisy here, why I talk about that they simply don't want to hear our voice, and they want to have a double standard and take power from us while preserving it for themselves. I see a question from Peggy. Is it okay to share everything with your organization on Facebook? Absolutely. Stephanie, I'm happy to send this. Philip, I see that. I see a question from Audrey. Is this happening in other states? Yes, it is. I want to say 4 years ago, there were about 40 bills across the country dealing with the initiative petition process. This year, I believe there are over 250. In fact, one of the main proponents of changing the Missouri process is a group called the Opportunity Solutions Project. They are based in Naples, Florida, and they were some of the early proponents and authors behind a lot of these bills. So they are seeking to do this not just in Missouri, but all across the country. I see Kevin would like to be trained in the presentation, and Philip, and it looks like Terry. So we can certainly send this around to everybody. Kay, I see you as well. Any other questions that I am missing? I know this is a shorter presentation than we often do, but we do. I think this is an issue that is frankly pretty simple, and what we know is if we talk about the details, if we talk about percentages and where you need to gather signatures and different things, we lose people, we confuse people. But if we remember, Rachel, if you don't mind going back a few slides to talk about the values of the initiative petition process, that this is about public will, and this is about our freedom to have a say on important issues, that will stick with voters. I see a question from Kathy. Who are the allies in the effort to keep the initiative petition as it is? So that is a great question, because the reality is the initiative petition process has been used by progressives on issues like minimum wage and Medicaid expansion and ethics reform, as well as conservatives. The Hancock Amendment, the earnings tax changes, things that we at Jobs with Justice do not like, were also passed via the initiative petition process. And so the allies in this are, include a strange coalition, what people would always call strange bedfellows. But it is a broad coalition. It is progressives, it is conservatives, it is independents, because what the initiative petition process is really about isn't about the partisanship that can exist in Jefferson City. It's really about the freedom of voters. And we know voters are not always, don't always break into the same categories that our politicians do. And so we do have a broad coalition who is working to protect our initiative petition process. I see a question from John. What time is the lobby day on March 3rd? I would expect the lobby day to be a sort of full day event, likely in Jefferson City between the hours of about 10 and 2, which, depending on where you're coming from, usually means leaving between 7:30 and 8. And we'll try to be done by 2 to get folks home in time for any childcare or picking up from school. And sorry, it is not March 3rd, it is May 3rd. We are going to be doing our lobby day towards the end of the legislative session, because that is partially when we expect these bills to really pick up steam. I see a question from Ben about the timing. When will the campaign begin? So I would say the campaign is beginning now with doing these presentations, with asking organizations to sign on, with doing the education to our community about what these threats are all about. We expect, and it's a little hard to tell right now, anyone who follows the news, Jefferson City is a bit more dysfunctional than it traditionally is. But we, typically bills get the most attention in the month of April. And so that is when we are going to be trying to direct the most voter contact into the Senate. And we encourage folks to please sign up, go ahead and sign up now It helps us plan for what we will need to be able to mobilize that effort, and then a bigger conclusion in May with an in-person lobby day. I see a question from Don about, can this webinar be uploaded to a union's web page? I imagine we can do that, or we can figure out how to do that. I see a question from Carlton. Is there any way to influence the wording of the bill when it comes before the voters? This is a great question, and one of the key differences between the initiative petition process and what the legislature gets to do. When you file an initiative petition, the proponents don't get to write the language that describes your issue. The Secretary of State has to do that. It is designed that way so that you can't unfairly describe your issue. That is not true with the legislature. When the legislature refers an issue to the ballot, they get to describe what the issue is that they're referring. And so knowing that, when we see initiative petition bills, it is quite possible that the bills will be written in a way to sound rather innocuous. To say things like, well, we're just increasing the geographic distance from where signatures need to come from so that everyone gets a chance to be able to have their voice heard. The reality is any of these bills are designed to make placing an issue on the ballot more difficult and then passing that issue more difficult. And so we have to constantly frame for our communities. That's about what every single one of these bills will do. And that's why we need to resist all of them. I see a question, how many key issues have passed on ballot initiative items? So the ballot initiatives, I believe 23 have passed in the state, constitutional amendments on ballot initiatives. I would argue that more recently, as our politics that have gotten increasingly polarized, ballot initiatives have become more important because frankly, politicians are not solving the issues that our community is facing. If our legislature was more effective as a legislature, then we wouldn't go do ballot initiatives. I think for everyone who indicated all the initiatives that you worked on, none of those were easy, were they? I think we could all use our weekends back, our evenings back, our money back. We don't do this as a hobby. We do them because they're necessary. And so our hope is that our politics would get to a less polarized position, and our politics could meet the needs of our communities. But in the meantime, that's why this is an important toolkit of our democracy, to be able to maintain that balance when our politics aren't. Audrey, I see a question, is there any group that is really supporting these? Traditionally, the only people that have been showing up in committee to testify in support of these have been politicians or the Secretary of State or that out-of-state group, the Opportunity Solutions Project. I see the question from Elena, who was the lobbyist in Naples, Florida? He's actually a Missouri lobbyist. His name is James Harris, but he is representing a group based in Naples, Florida. Any other questions? I really appreciate everyone's time. I know we're going to have a lot of work on this. I'm glad to see people who are interested in sharing this presentation. with more folks. You can always connect with any of us in our regions, and the emails are up there. You can always find me at richard@mojwj.org, and happy to share this presentation and the notes that go along with it. I see a final question from what was, I assume, Jay Ashcroft's justification for his support of changing the initiative petition process. You know, he doesn't like the issues that have passed and thinks it's too easy for people to pass them. You know, I think earlier in the presentation I mentioned, like, some people are just getting really sick of democracy. And I think that's the answer there. Diane, you asked a question. Sorry, I almost missed this. When would this be on the ballot? So if a bill is passed, it would be slated to go on the November ballot, but the governor would be able, I believe the governor or the legislature could actually move it to the August ballot. So that is why we do not really have time to lose in doing these presentations and alerting people what's at stake, because this could be on either the August or November 2022 ballot. I see some more comments in the chat about where to send this. We will make sure to save all of those and be able to send this around afterwards. Okay, any other questions? Well, I appreciate everyone's help. I appreciate all of the effort that it is, frankly, because of all of you that some politicians now see this as a problem, because of your efforts and your success to deliver justice to the people of this state. And so we will continue to do that, and continue to fight to preserve this process. Please look for an email with the notes and links, and please do sign up, and we'll keep pushing here. Thanks for everyone's time this afternoon.